Hello, Great Giza Pyramid. Well, from the beginning, I've always appreciated the Great Giza Pyramid, the structure. As far as its manufacturing, I think it's a very awesome structure. It wasn't until about half a decade ago, 2012, so I guess it's a little bit more than half a decade, I really started to focus on all the quirks about the structure. And the more I stumbled, the more I learned that the stories that are told about the structure don't really represent the structure that is located on the Giza Plateau outside of Cairo. There are people who went and measured all the elevations of every one of the steps, both in the 1800s and some Japanese kid, I say kid because I think he's younger than me, did it just recently. Got it all into a computer, made some nice modeling. When I get my fingers on those, he said he's going to make them public, so that'd be nice. But things that are underappreciated is the fact that this structure is doing work to this very day. Just like a windmill would be doing work, or a water flume that goes to a water mill would be doing work. Up until we decided to put a little antenna on the top of it, it was collecting static electricity constantly, all day long, and quarantining it to the structure the best it can. It does this because it has within those steps waves. And what the waves are doing is taking the static electricity and coaxing it towards the top of the structure. And if this wasn't on here, it would be acting like a large Van de Graaff generator. This accounts for why in the 1800s and prior, people would go up there with little jars of water and a little damp rag and could get sparks to snap from it, and your hair would stand up on end because basically you were standing on the surface of a large Van de Graaff generator. So this is something completely overlooked. And one of the sources of the energy that they use to make the actual system within the three structures work. Because to amplify that, to having something that just wants to get to ground, if you put the antithesis of ground, then you're actually going to have a larger delta, a larger thing for that electricity to jump, and hence more energy. One of the things that quarantining it is the 35th step. Now, that happens to be about 60 centimeters in size, both in depth and elevation. So kind of the steps go like that in that area. And that large gap is a barrier for the static electricity to hurdle and hence builds up on the structure. Now, at about the 50% mark up the structure, which is the same elevation as the top of the third pyramid, is a step just slightly below that, and then at, I think it's 20% of the way up or something like that, is another step, and that one represents the area in which this one changes from larger steps to smaller steps. And then from there up, it's a consistent smaller step, and then down here it's a consistent larger step. And it happens to be at that same level. And that level is actually kind of in the middle of the grotto, because this level is where the Queen's Chamber is. Now, all this gives you little elevation marks, because this all has to do with buoyancy and pressures, the way the whole system itself works. It's quite awesome and unique when you get into it. They're utilizing some of the earth energy to separate between the only two places the structure touches earth, ground. And that would be the pit in the grotto area and the pit in the subterranean chamber, or unfinished room. Call it unfinished because, well, they don't appreciate it. But what they're doing, and exactly how they're getting the delta between the two of them, I can guess, but I'm just looking at the system, is taking the primarily oxygen, which would come off of the lower section, piping it out of the structure, and in the process of piping it out of the structure, doing a little bit of work, and we'll get to that in a second. There's also the dead end shaft here is ribbed like an inchworm. It is not a nice straight shaft. And you'll understand why. Well, there's a gentleman, John Cadman, who found evidence of cavitation and kind of did document that there was pressure bubbles coming through here, but I think his source of the pressure bubbles is a little bit wrong, because as the oxygen comes out through this area right here, it is going to bubble up over the edge and create what he referred to as the water hammer. There's no moving parts in here, no magical pieces. One of the things that aid this is a tooth about 6 feet in, and this area right here is all flat and smooth. And this will allow an oxygen bubble to grow across the top of here until it goes out through there and creates its water hammer. If you look at pictures from the 1800s, you can see deposits of dirt, about 4 of them across there. If you look at the pictures of even into the 90s on here, before people really started crawling in there, you could see the same thing, but they were at a slightly faster rate, and they seemed in some cases to try to line up with the ribs. So I'm not sure if it was because of the ribs or because that was the pressure and they were trying to catch one of the points to try to get some cavitation or some other feature going on. But either way, they were using that shock wave to do something. Now, in here, the way it's engineered, after the little bubble, it's kind of like stucco. And also, if you look at it, people have taken pictures. The way the hallway is designed, there's a raised bubble with a channel to the side and a kind of a moat right there, which I believe would bring the hydrogen, because that's the lighter of the gases, back into the room, into this section, trying to harvest as much of the hydrogen as possible, but let the oxygen flow below the hydrogen and across the surface of the water and out into the system. Now I can tell you some hydrogen managed to escape because you can see the trail marks going up the entire structure, like up the hallway. You can like actually visually see them. And that's scarring from hundreds of years of this stuff. But the lip on this side is about an inch lower than the lip on this side, which also allows for the hydrogen, the lighter of the gases, to kind of be pumped back into there. And there's the way it's cut across the room again, there's like a little V shape into there. And on this side, there's a ravine going the opposite way. So the oxygen coming out of the room comes this way, the hydrogen comes into the room, goes this way. And as the pressures push, they're going to squish each other their own respective ways. So it's like two ships passing in the night. Most efficient way to do it. And then the oxygen will come into there and mix, but because of buoyancy and stuff, the hydrogen will be the gas that winds up getting pumped out. The oxygen flows the other way, and it's all very nice and happy. There's more to it when we get into the system, but hang on. The way this is going to work up here is it's got a flat area, it's got another area that bubbles down below it, actually kind of like so. Actually this area bubbles up into it, that area doesn't bubble down below it. It is shaped, and this is actually much deeper in size, and actually for whatever reason comes back out. It's kind of shaped like so. But this is going to be your source of hydrogen, and I'm not 100% sure how the pressures in here work, but the way they loop on top of each other, I know water can't ever go above itself, so I think it's going to make some sort of a water lock. There's also, that is the entrance that goes into the cavity, which is coming up from here, coming down and going up through behind there, and up to the well shaft, as they like to call it. So it's a very unique room. Oh, and there are holes drilled in the southern wall that the king used to store his scrolls in. Well, Those would be the conduits that again come out of the southern wall, and the way this is shaped, I believe it's actually up here, comes out of the southern wall, comes around to the side of the Queen's chamber and up, all the way up to the area above the King's chamber, where they call the relieving chambers, where they find seeds and shells and dust, which I'm saying are impurities brought up with the updraft, and they say they don't know. But either way, that's where the hydrogen will come out into the upper part of the system. From there, it's brought down below the King's chamber, where it came up through the hole that's in the floor that they scratch their heads and don't know about. That would be filled with water initially. That would be your flashback separator. It is designed in such a way that the hydrogen has to go through like a little air bubble chamber so that it would come up beneath the water level up into the room. No problem. Comes up into the room. It's very happy in that room. Within that room, over to the one side, that's the south conduit, the only conduit that reaches the surface of the structure. It has this really cool kind of looking shape, which I desecrated there a little bit. This comes way lower and actually is way bigger, like so. And where this comes out into the surface is in the middle of a square, kind of like so, and here is your opening, like so. This is this line right here, like so. And it is done in such a way that as if I draw that opening, crack, actually it's more like that, and because of how it is, it's actually coming down shaped like so. So as the water level raises in the room, it chokes off its oxygen supply, or its air supply actually. It's ambient airs, which its focus is the oxygen, the 21% oxygen by volume that we breathe in every day. Thank goodness for the plants, taking the CO2, give us oxygen, circle of life. Anyway, that would be your choke valve, and that would happen when the water level, once the spark went off, burnt the two fuels together, would raise the water level in the room to the same level as the two conduits that go, well, this one goes to the surface, this one breaches the surface. Like I said, this is your oxygen input, more to the fact it's air, so you are getting nitrogen in there as well. We may get a mixture when we get deeper into the story. That goes to the surface, comes back down. There's a drip tunnel. That drip tunnel comes to what they call the thieves' entrance. That thieves' entrance is right in front of the boss mark, right in front of the, what they like to call the pre-chamber, the ante-chamber. Now, what this does is right behind where they have the boss mark, there would be a wall. Actually, I think there's a series of gates, but for right now, mentally, let's just put a wall that would allow the water level within this King's chamber area to fill that pool till it gets to the point where it's choking itself off and maintains itself as any good furnace would at a comfortable roar, with the oxygen supply coming in from one side, the hydrogen bubbling up through the room. You can see the scarring along the back of the room, right where I say the hydrogen would be coming up, showing that the fire was happening towards there. Every now and then, I think there was also some fire happening right as it came in, because you can see some scorching there as well. But you can see where the reactions were occurring within the room, and they agree with my suggestion of the flow of the room. Like I said, the scarring agrees with my suggestion. So anyway, so that's how that would be working. This would be creating water vapor, hot water, steam, whatever you want to call it, that would protrude up this particular conduit, condensate, and come back down. That's why I said this was a drip thing. It would come drip down into the back of the, what they like to call the thieves' tunnel. Not the thieves' entrance, that's down here at the bottom. That's where we actually broke the surface and came into the structure. I'm talking about the thieves' tunnel that they say is not part of it, even though across the top of it is a nice engineered rectangular shaped tunnel. So they can either say they were chasing that conduit or that they just made up the thieves thing entrance because they assumed. They didn't know what they were looking at, so they assumed because they didn't understand the system. Anyway, that pours out into the Grand Gallery. The Grand Gallery then comes down. And this is the same Grand Gallery, just I did some, you gotta do some Hollywood magic here. My poor artistic license. Okay, so that room is such that it is shaped like so, so that any condensation on the walls is dripping down into the room. Even the top part here that comes down, it's shaped the same way. All condensation is pooling and dripping down. It's getting lots and lots of condensation. Every bit of condensation that moves down is pulling a bit of static electricity with it. So it's, by essence, pulling the static electricity into the system, even a millimeter at a time, I don't care, because it's making room for other static electricity to work into the top part, and it's just forcing itself down the system. Now on top of this, that part dripping down, and the way this whole thing is engineered, you're getting a bit of a Lord Kelvin drip. Two different drips, two different polarities, right next to each other. You're going to get a bit of a spark. That spark every now and then is going to light off gases, well, I'm not going to say any. You're going to have more combustion there with the gases. You can see scarring across the top of this section. Of course, now they're probably going to polish the heck out of it or something, which agrees again with this suggestion. And the Lord Kelvin drip generator is the spark that ignites that, where this spark is just the unsymmetriness of the room and the ambient static electricity on the outside. All working together, one big play. So, here we go, bringing it down. So you got this moisture coming down. The moisture comes down into the room. It's going to fill this whole dead end shaft, or not dead end shaft, what they like to call the ascending shaft. It's going to fill that whole area, and it's going to move over. It's also going to fill the area that comes into the Queen's Chamber. We're going to move the Queen's Chamber over here a bit to fit my new drawing here. Okay, bad drawing there. Okay, there's the area. That's a very deep pool. The pool by proportion is only about a third of the size of that. But with the oxygen coming out of here, doing the air hammer bit, going across the top of the thing, working its way out, as it fights out through what they like to say was loosely fitting rock, I don't care what they want to call it, I'm going to say it was engineered a lot better than loosely fitting rock. But as it's coming out there, it's creating an oxygen bubble, further separating the outside world from the inside world. And the way it's engineered going out there brings the water level down to a water level either below or within this area. We really have to measure the elevation of that marking on the outside, because I think the marking actually denotes the true elevation of what it should be, and see where that lines up. But I believe it is slightly below the lip of the Queen's Chamber, that hallway, which would make the condensation in this room be separated from any of the other condensation, and is going to create an anomaly in nature, which will then generate a release of energy. That release of energy, the way a whole lot more things are engineered in the room as far as the way the condensation works, is going to force that spark out the shaft that was behind the wall in the southern side, which is where they had a nice little electrical arc there that they drilled through to find the conduit. And then when they found the conduit on the other side, it's 6 inches deeper into the room, and because of the way the niche is generated, the niche is actually off center within the room, so that this is the closer of the two conduits, and electricity likes to find the path of least resistance. So it engineered this whole setup, and that gap there was just less than the gap between, what I didn't mention is at the same elevation as this bottom level here where it does it, its little inlet is where there's a mark that goes in. The same elevation as the water level, there is a conduit off the back of this that goes down basically into the center of the structure. Just below water level, it goes down to an elevation down there. And there's a conduit off from the side that comes in, goes up to a larger area that comes down into its internal structures, which are basically two different levels that come out and would go up. And this elevation is all within the same area. Oh, and the structure right next to it, its elevation is right below the water mark. That's where its internal structure is. And its internal structure then comes down and lines up in elevation with the water level in here, so the top of it, because it has a little lip on both sides there. This side is actually lower. Well, to allow this gas to go out, and that lines up with there, and it all has to do with water pressures within the entire structure. And when you look at it, it's a quite amazing thing. This elevation here is, well, this is below it. This elevation is somewhere in between, and this elevation is within the area of the grotto. So it's this elevation probably ties in with here, but I haven't confirmed that because I haven't really gotten a good idea for what the larger room in there does, but it's in the same elevation. I think the same way that we do cooling and condensing with the multiple coils to go to the different things, get all the way down to liquid helium and stuff, they're using some sort of condensation, forced condensation, and forced reactions to get at a product which can be maintained because it can't work its way out above water level. Water level would be right there. And it's trapped within this whole structure, generated within this structure, and I think it's going within the water. And it's all trapped because I believe of the creep factor that heavy water has. It's trapped by the switch, the gate, which is to the east side of the Giza Pyramid, where you've got that room with the 3 openings and the hole right there. That's to allow all the waters to flow, but not to let the heavy water escape out of the system. It's all kept within the gate. So I do think it has something to do with using the creep factor of heavy hydrogen. So exactly what and how, I'm still playing with those toys, but this is really where I'm sitting as far as the system, how I can read it, and what I believe it's doing. I'd really like to get more. I know there's a dip right here, which will allow for a gas to fill this entire area, a gas or a separate liquid. A liquid that is, maybe that's regular water and the whole bottom part is heavy water. Not 100% sure. I really don't know the fine details. It is possible, maybe by pushing heavy water down it's doing something. I mean, I don't have a big, huge lab to play with this stuff, so I'm just trying to play mind games, and I'm drawing it out so other people can see and understand the system as I understand it so far and what they're doing. And I really think the way that they got this to be a different voltage than this was by pumping the waters from around the moat, around this middle structure, the one that is smooth at the top and has the grounding thing and has smaller, larger steps trying to they're also playing with static electricity here. The static electricity here will be at a different voltage than the static electricity here. By taking that pool and running it down underneath it, you're going to get a pull from one side that's different than the other, the natural ground. So you're going to get a reaction. And how they exactly did it, I don't know. We got to really map all those conduits underneath the plateau. There's many of them, and they're not all connected to each other. They are like little circuit boards there, like 3D circuit boards. Quite an amazing structure, and when you appreciate more about it and you understand how it's functioning and what the basic system flow is, it really shows you that they had a great knowledge of many of the features of water and the other elements that we play with today. And also I can tell you that 2-3 decades ago somebody probably could not visualize this because we just the general knowledge wasn't there. And if it was, well, then we've lost it. I mean, because a lot of people don't even comprehend static electricity or electricity as it is. It's just this little toy that comes out of the wall, and we don't understand or appreciate it. And it wasn't until just recently that we really focused that water is hydrogen and oxygen. And it was only the 1600s that we technically discovered hydrogen, and sometime in the 1700s that we decided we discovered oxygen. So 200, 300 years ago, no one could even have figured this out because they didn't know water split into its respective gases. They didn't even know that. So sure, a tomb idea was great because it was I don't know, sounded good. But I think we're way past that. And I hope you agree. Thanks. Later, bye.